As many of you know, I work for our denominational seminary, Bethany Seminary in Richmond, Indiana, but I have an office here in the church, just down the hall. And if you come to my office, you will notice some interesting items hanging on the walls. 2 traditional Japanese robes called yukatas. I have had the incredible fortune to visit Japan twice in my life. The first was in 2004 when Torin's parents were in Hiroshima in Brethren volunteer service. The second time was in 2010 when Torin and I joined 2 other clergy couples as a part of a Lilly Grant Foundation study group. Both times when I went to Japan, it was with the intention of studying the life and work of Kobo Daishi, who is a Buddhist monk and founder of the Shingon sect of Buddhism. Both times we ventured to mountain peak monasteries. Both times we explored the wandering grounds of Buddhist temples. And both times we went to Senzuji, one of the 88 temples on the pilgrimage around Shikoku, a sacred island to Japan's Shingon Buddhist community. Now, underneath the temple at Senzuji is a circular tunnel that follows the perimeter of the temple. And on the wall of the tunnel are paintings that tell a story, multiple stories of the Buddha. But you don't see these pictures underground because it's dark. And I mean pitch dark, pitch black dark. So rather than seeing these pictures, these stories, you run your hand along the wall and you let the wall guide you around the curves of the tunnel. Your hand passes over stories that your eyes cannot see. Well, immediately after entering this tunnel on the first trip, I knew that this was not for me. I felt my heart racing. It was dark, too dark. Being in pitch black dark is not easy to come by in our electrically wired world, and I wasn't having any of it. I looked around as if I was going to see a lighted exit sign, and just before I turned around to run for the entrance behind me, I decided to close my eyes. And I felt better. Because I was used to the dark behind my eyes, you know. I see that all the time. This dark was my friend, the dark I long for every night when I go to bed. The dark behind my eyes helped calm me down, and I found myself still uncomfortable, but I was able to finish my journey. Now skip ahead 6 years. I'm at the same temple, the same doorway into the dark abyss. I was with one of 6 Church of the Brethren clergy folk, ready to go underground. My breath is already getting shallow and quick, and the 6 of us descend, and my heart rate ascends. Panic, I give a little groan. And I finally remembered that trick that I remembered the first time, and I closed my eyes. And I realized it's okay. But I still remember muttering, I don't like this. And then I feel it. A gentle hand takes mine. One of my companions, I don't know or remember if it was Torin or Russ or Aaron or Bill or Sarah. One of my companions held my hand until the blazing light of the external world came streaming onto us. The hand of my companion. As good as what Peter says in 1 Peter, as good as lamps shining in a dark place, as good as Peter saying in our Matthew scripture today, this is a good place for us to be. That hand was good. As scary as it is in this tunnel, as terrifying as what life is throwing at you, there are lamps shining for us, showing us the blessing in the dark places. Now, the gospel story today is commonly known as the Transfiguration because Jesus is transfigured, apparently like a transformer, right, before Peter, James, and John. The empty space around him is transfigured into the presence of Elijah and Moses, a trinity of prophets, wise sages, teachers, blazing bright. And down there, down in the darkness, three friends, Peter, James, and John, simultaneously terrified and elated. The theological significance of this moment is that in the Transfiguration, the true nature of Jesus is revealed clearly, without question, brightly, human and divine. I can just picture a hand grasping for a friend in this dazzling moment. Peter's shout of, "Lord, it is good for us to be here," drowning out John's weak confession, muttering, "I don't like this." Now, really, we don't know what the other said other than Peter, but we do know that two things happen on this mountain, and this is the important part. On this mountain, friends accompanied and God affirmed. Accompany, to be a companion, to be with someone, to walk with someone, to hold the hand of someone, to make a camp and pitch a tent, to be willing to fall down on your face in fear or joy or grief and let someone see you do it. Affirm, to offer support, encouragement, to say that something is true. God affirms that Jesus is beloved. And this, my friends, this simultaneous accompaniment and affirmation, this is what I believe the Christian walk leading us into our own transfiguration is built on. This is what makes possible the walk into transformation, into salvation. A walk in which we accompany and affirm one another. Now just take a moment and think of the potential gift we have here. We have a group of people here who are called to be church. A group of people who, I hope, are here with a commitment to walk and encourage you, to accompany you and affirm you. Just think about that. How many people in the world just wish they had even a taste of that? We are called to accompany and affirm each other. And my question for you today is, are you doing that? Are we doing that? Not just with those you've gone to church with for 50 years, or with those who are young like yourself, or who think like you, or who believe church should be done like you think it should be done. Are you willing to accompany and affirm that person who is in no way like yourself? Because I'll warn you, those who accompany you and affirm you, they may not look like people you would normally choose to be your friends. They can be surprising. And perhaps because they may be so different from those whom you have dinner with on a Friday night, or play golf with on Saturday morning, or have a book group discussion with, because they are so different, this may be the way they show Christ's illuminating face to you so clearly. I've been extremely moved by the mission of the L'Arche communities around the world. L'Arche is a French word for ark, and is a movement of intentional communities of people with mental and physical disabilities, and their friends and helpers who live with them. Their founder is Jean Vanier, a French soldier turned philosopher who found Christ most clearly in the lives of whom society discarded. The L'Arche community was significant in the spiritual life of Henry Nouwen, Nouwen was a Catholic priest who taught pastoral psychology and theology at some of the country's most distinguished academic institutions. He wrote over 40 books. He was sought-out speaker and teacher. Henry Nouwen is what you might call a muckety-muck among the upper echelons of theological academia. But in his book, In the Name of Jesus, Henry reflects on the loneliness he faced, even in the midst of such comfortable notoriety and position. He said that after 20 years of being a teacher, he wondered if it brought him any closer to Jesus. And he realized he still had a long way to go. So Henry moved from Harvard to the L'Arche community called Daybreak, a residential community for people with mental and physical disabilities in Canada. He moved there to be a chaplain and a full community member. He went to find a renewed purpose in his ministry. Sometimes they're the same thing. We're talking about synonyms here, right? In his words, he said, "I moved to L'Arche from the best and the brightest, wanting to rule the world, to men and women who had few or no words and were considered, at best, marginal to the needs of our society." He said, "The first thing that struck me when I came to live in a house with mentally handicapped people was that their liking or disliking me had absolutely nothing to do with any of my many useful things I had done until then. Since nobody could read my books, the books could not impress anyone. And since most of them never went to school, my 20 years at Notre Dame, Yale, and Harvard did not provide a significant introduction. My considerable ecumenical experience proved even less valuable. In a way, it seemed as though I was starting my life all over again. Relationships, connections, reputations I once had could no longer be counted on." Nouwen shares a story that while at Daybreak, he was invited to a conference in Washington, D.C. The community decided that Bill should go with Henry. Bill was one of the higher functioning residents of the community. And as they prepared for their trip to D.C., Bill kept telling Henry, "We're doing this together, aren't we?" "Yes, Bill," said Henry, we sure are." Henry said that up until the moment he approached the microphone, he didn't exactly know what Bill's emphasis of doing it together would mean. That time, Henry took his handwritten text to the podium, leaving Bill in the audience. Once Henry began, however, Bill walked up to the podium and planted himself right behind Henry. "It was clear," said Nouwen, "that he had a much more concrete idea about the meaning of doing it together than I. Each time I finished reading a page, he took it away and put it upside down on a small table nearby. I felt very much at ease with this and started to feel Bill's presence as a support." But Bill had more in mind. When I began to speak about the temptation to turn stones into bread as a temptation to be relevant, he interrupted me and said loudly for everyone to hear, "I've heard that before." He had indeed, and he just wanted the priests and ministers who were listening to know that he knew me quite well and was familiar with my ideas. For me, however, it felt like a gentle, loving reminder that my thoughts were not as new as I wanted my audience to believe. Bill's intervention created a new atmosphere in the ballroom, lighter, easier, and more playful. Somehow Bill had taken away the seriousness of the occasion and had brought it to some homespun normality. As I continued my presentation, I felt more and more that we were indeed doing this together, and it felt good. After I'd finished reading my text and people had shown their appreciation, Bill said to me, "Henry, can I say something now?" My first reaction was, "Oh, how am I going to handle this?" He might start rambling and create an embarrassing situation. But then I caught myself in my presumption that he had nothing of importance to say. and said to the audience, "Bill would like to say a few words to you." Bill took the microphone and said, with all the difficulty he has in speaking, he said, "Last time when Henry went to Boston, he took John Smeltzer with him. This time he wanted me to come with him to Washington, and I'm very glad to be here with you. Thank you very much." That was it. And everyone stood up and gave him warm applause. As we flew back together to Toronto, Nouwen concludes, Bill looked up from the word puzzle book that he takes with him wherever he goes, and he said, "Henry, did you like our trip?" "Oh, yes," I answered. "It was a wonderful trip, and I am so glad you came with me." Bill looked at me attentively and then said, "And we did this together, didn't we?" "Yes, Bill, we did. Yes, Bill, we did." It is this sort of accompanying and affirmation that brings the transfiguration to our lives, being with another person and helping them receive a clearer picture of Christ, allowing another person to show you more clearly the face of Christ. And that person may likely be a surprising, potentially embarrassing companion, or someone you might likely not normally associate with, or someone who you see as so far beneath you because, let's face it, our ego sometimes says that only Jesus, blazing in his glory, is good enough for us. It is that person who is not obviously blazing who will most likely be the witness to your transfiguration. And as you step out into the darkness and into the light with this surprising person, you may find that the only words you can muster are, "It is good for us to be here." Amen.